Usually in fiction, you have your protagonist who starts out in one place and ends up in another, following the hero's journey structure pretty closely. He doesn't start out as the hero, he becomes the hero. At the beginning of Star Wars, Luke Skywalker wants to go on an adventure, but he doesn't really understand what that means. His delusions of grandeur fade pretty quickly as he goes through a trial by fire that turns him from the adventurer that he wants to be into the hero that he needs to be. He ends up trading his love of adventuring for the responsibility of doing good and restoring peace. Zuko trades his desire to capture the Avatar for the responsibility of working alongside him, and Batman gives up his burning goal of being a vengeful vigilante in order to become the selfless, impartial hero that Gotham needs, driven by justice instead of revenge. Rinse and repeat. Iron Man, The Flash, Doctor Strange, Thor, the vast majority of heroes follow this pattern of development. But the Boy Scouts aren't like that. They don't start off in one place and end up in another. In fact, they don't change much at all, and that makes them seem boring to both the masses and, more regrettably, to the people that write them. Superman always saves the day, Liu Kang always wins, and Captain America is always right. Edgy Elseworlds takes notwithstanding. And that might leave one asking themselves, what's the point? The point is to resist. You know all those detective shows and lawyer shows or mystery or supernatural shows where the point of each episode is to solve a mystery, a murder, a puzzle, to MacGyver a clever way out, you know, like the actual MacGyver show, or to resist corruption, temptation, or possession? That's what this archetype is all about. Not that every protagonist from such shows are this way, but my point is that this kind of framework fits static, unwavering heroes the best. They already possess the qualities that make for a great hero, so the conflict comes not from trying to become even more of a hero, but from attempts to corrupt the hero, to make him falter, break his word, give up, give in. It is the world's irresistible compulsion to bring exceptional paragons down to our level. This is a very interesting kind of conflict to portray, and if this still sounds boring to you, it's because this archetype hasn't been portrayed very well in popular media. In fact, you could make the case that even the comics don't understand their own characters well enough, since Superman comics grew to sport every color of kryptonite under the sun. Kryptonite has its place, but a life-threatening rock isn't the main conflict in a Superman story. The main conflict of a Superman story comes from the moral battles, not the physical ones. The ideal Superman film would never once put him in mortal danger, just moral danger. This is the man with the perfect family who stands to lose it all if he cheats on his wife. This is the entrepreneur with the perfect company who's constantly assaulted with tempting offers to sell it to corporations who would dismantle it and sell it for parts. This is the leader who is one step away from venting all of his anger and frustration, thus turning all of his subordinates away from him. With a traditional hero story, you know the hero's going to win in the end, so the novelty and value comes not from seeing him win, but from seeing how he'll win. And such is the case for the moral hero. You watch him to see not whether or not he'll resist corruption, that's a given, but to see how he does it, how he figures out which is the moral path, or where he summons his inner strength from. And between you and me, the latter type seems much more interesting because it involves complex moral predicaments and tests that go beyond just an enjoyable but forgettable fistfight. More importantly, it's relatable, is the kind of problems that real-life, regular people have to tackle every day. The original Liu Kang, for instance, did not kill, not even through fatalities. And I think that's correct. He shows a better path forward to a universe with some very bloody, deep-seated customs. The moment when Liu stops being Liu is the moment when he loses, and all the realms with him. This is the moral battle at play here. Or at least what it should be. Soups should be the guy who's constantly tempted by his power. Promises of glory and stewardship, powerful alliances offered by persuasive, charismatic people, a temptation to show off, to cheat. All these things would put the boring, brute force aspects on the back seat and would let the honest, hard-working, honorable Kansas boy shine and test how good a person he truly is. As for Cap, he would shine the most in the most maddening, paranoia-fueled action thriller where everything looks and sounds like it could be true, but it could also be a lie, and where there are a plethora of very persuasive, charismatic characters all trying to sway Cap, and through him the audience, to their point of view. Captain America the Winter Soldier already fulfilled much of this vibe, but failed to accomplish the main quest of making us, the audience, the guys who should always know right from wrong, question what is truly right and what is wrong. It's the thing that Joker accomplished with the talk show scene, where the audience was persuaded to want Robert De Niro's character dead, even though it's a wrong thing to want. That's a kind of story where Steve Rogers would shine, because the audience, completely paranoid and drunk on conspiracies, would then be completely blindsided when Steve Rogers refuses to do as they would do in the climax of the movie. It would be true subversion and a surprise that the audience would remember. A scene that would make us have to think and take a step back to realize that Rogers is right, and then like him even more for it. This is the kind of story where the unwavering masculine shines. When all common sense and morality have left the room, this masculine paragon keeps the world from devouring itself. This is the father, the leader, the athlete, the archetype that often has to forgo small but significant benefits that most other people take for granted. Superman can't afford to get angry, Steve Rogers can't afford to take sides, and Liu Kang can't afford to abandon his role as champion. He's like an athlete that's perpetually stuck in the intense prep leading up to a competition. It's a grueling life. And the games are rather clumsy in communicating this aspect. In MK4, for instance, Kitana, who's this 10,000-year-old princess of a paradise world, offers Liu Kang a place at her side to rule together. Basically the most epic interdimensional booty call of the century, and my guy simply says, "No thanks, I belong here as champion of Earthrealm." This is a little contextless and makes you, question Liu Kang's sexuality, suddenly putting his relationship with fellow White Lotus member Kai in a new perspective. But if the storytelling wasn't so damn bare bones, the reasoning behind this decision wouldn't be so hard to grasp, and if you fill in the blanks a little, it's much easier to understand where the Bruce Lee clone's coming from. Liu Kang's an anomaly. It's not explicitly stated, but if you look at his accomplishments, it's painfully obvious that he's not just an Earthrealm champion who got lucky. He's consistently beat monsters, sorcerers, and demigods, the equivalent of legit superheroes in a comic book, and in this sense is no less significant than Superman or Captain America. They all act as nuclear deterrents for their respective versions of Earth. To elaborate on the, at this point, annoyingly familiar quote from a certain Queen's kid's uncle, once you attain power, it's not like you have to go to some office and get licensed to use it, or decide to pay taxes off it, or wait for the supreme authority god figure to come and assign you some responsibility. No, you already have responsibility. Once you attain power, responsibility comes with it. The two are linked. If Liu Kang abandons his realm and runs off to rule Edenia and its finest assets, he's effectively robbing Earthrealm of its best defense against interdimensional threats. That's a moral choice, like it or not. Other masculine archetypes may frame it differently, but the Boy Scout archetype very much frames it this way. The great Kung Lao from Mortal Kombat Conquest does a better job of exploring this problem much more meaningfully.
You always said it rested on me.
To find new fighters, so if you do lose, there's a new victor to take your place.
And a new sucker for you to manipulate. So I do my part for humankind, and it's so long, Kung Lao. Next.
Look, you are good. If you play your cards right, you could live forever. Or not. You're mortal. Mortals die.
And I will, in the next Mortal Kombat tournament. Or 2 or 3 down the line, and for what? So that others can be happy for a few extra years? When I finally fall, the Earthrealm is lost anyway.
Are you listening to this? If I die, the Earthrealm falls. What a crummy life. Here's a word of advice. Get over yourself and get on with it.
Despite Raiden's expertly delivered snark, Kung Lao's concerns are legitimate. His role as Earthrealm's champion and victor of Mortal Kombat is to constantly train, keep himself in peak condition, stay ever vigilant and wary of the ever-growing number of enemies and parties interested in his death, train other potential future champions while also not getting terribly attached to them or anyone else, since he'll likely far outlive them all, since the victor of Mortal Kombat is granted long life until the next tournament. So ironically, the champion of humanity is separated from humanity. He's kept far removed from them, protects them, he sacrifices for them, and fights for a people that he will never get to truly be a part of. He will either outlive them all or die fighting for them, both of which sound like crummy outcomes. And that is the context behind Liu Kang's decision as well. And this isn't just reserved for superpowered protagonists in a fictional nerd realm. Every entrepreneur who's ever built something to help people, every father, every skilled laborer, any guy you'd refer to as a man, not the gender but the status of a real man, they'll all tell you the same thing, that there's a certain degree of sacrifice that comes with the territory and that is, at least in part, motivated by a desire to serve others. Again, if you want to celebrate and serve humanity but you end up doing it partly by removing yourself from humanity, whether that means holding yourself to a higher standard than humanity to inspire them, foregoing attachment to them, or protect them, toiling day and night for them instead of with them to build a product for them, or perhaps to train day and night for an athletic competition, whatever the case, there is a certain degree of removing oneself from their people in order to serve their people, which is an intriguing little paradox. This is the part of Superman that Zack Snyder tried to explore and that everyone hated him for. A Superman that gets harshly judged by various experts and the news, that gets framed, bullied, mocked, misinterpreted, constantly attacked, threatened. This is the kind of thing that happens when you are physically stronger than others, or more intellectually superior than others, when you have political power, when you have a giant following, when you're a multi-millionaire, when you're the head of a giant company. Yes, there is adoration as you would expect, that comes first. But criticism, skepticism, and hate come along with it. People will poke and prod and test you in the cruelest of ways, and that's really the part of Superman that Snyder wanted to explore in both Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice, Ugliest Name in the World. That's the actual full title. This is not a glowing recommendation of those movies, by the way. It's not a review or critique either, just an analysis of intent. We could talk for days about the flaws within these movies, some of them warranted, most of them subjective, but the one incontrovertible flaw they do have is that their timing was off. If Superman had gotten a modern, comic book accurate interpretation first, that people could gush over and hold up as the standard, then Snyder's decidedly Elseworlds take on the character would have been received as a nice supplemental exploration of the less talked about aspects of Superman, rather than being remembered as that one interpretation that fucked up the character. It's not even so much Elseworlds as it is an exploration of the mental challenges of being Superman as seen through the eyes of not Superman, not even Clark Kent, but of you and me, of the audience, of a regular person who's not ready for, nor did they ask for such responsibility. But as I said earlier, responsibility isn't asked for or bestowed, it simply exists. It's inherent and scales with your power level, and since Superman's power level is off the fucking charts, so too is his responsibility. The entire arc of these movies was supposed to be sampling what that responsibility feels like, get overwhelmed by it, and then triumph over it at the very end. And this is all a very surreal, hyperbolic version of our own very real struggle with responsibility, particularly as men. Moving away from Snyder's interpretation to a more holistic version of the character, this critical scene from the Justice League show elegantly expresses what it is to be Superman perhaps better than anything else could.
I feel like I live in a world made of cardboard, always taking constant care not to break something, to break someone. Never allowing myself to lose control, even for a moment, or someone could die.
If this sounds like a hyper-stressful, borderline miserable existence, that's because it is. A woman is allowed to have outbursts, to complain, to demand sympathy, even to display a certain level of violence against her fellow man. It's real shitty behavior that shouldn't be condoned, but society tends to give it a pass. A man, however, cannot afford to have real outbursts. Much like for Superman, the stakes are too high, the consequences too dire. If a man hits a woman, all hell breaks loose in every way you could practically imagine, so he can't afford to do that. Unless that's, her kink. Who am I to judge? So this archetype stands for the disciplinary aspect of manhood. It stands for all the things men are tempted to do that they know they can't afford to do. And a hero like Soup's Cap and Kang can seem boring to people for the same reasons why an actual man who embodies this archetype in the real world can seem too uptight and too in control of himself to women. Because women will poke and prod and try to understand more and more about a man, partly because they're curious, partly because they like them, and partly to get leverage during the divorce. But this archetype would suggest that there there is a substrate of the male self that should perhaps remain undespoiled, be it because it's too dark, too soft, too vulnerable, or too menacing. A character like Iron Man can have a weekend bender at the nearest nightclub charity event after party and still remain Iron Man. A character like Steve Rogers can't. This is kind of the point of the red kryptonite from the Smallville version of Clark Kent, which turns him into a rebellious, erotic, erratic, selfish piece of shit. This is the point of the Revenant and zombie versions of Liu Kang. It's the part of the masculine that, if plundered, will turn the whole enterprise rotten, and it's kind of a fun trope that only this archetype truly makes good use of. Because Batman can drone on and on about his mysterious, dark, and vulnerable side that no one's ever seen. At the end of the day, we all know exactly what that is. The Wookiees from Kashyyyk fucking know what that is. The orphan trauma and elephant-sized martyr complex that makes him tick. It's written on his fucking face. But the things that make Superman tick are far more mysterious. The most private musings, doubts, and passions of Captain America are much more enticing to discover. The vulnerabilities behind the perfect warrior are absolutely intriguing to explore. And it's a big bummer that these things aren't explored properly. Probably because most writers don't see the characters this way nor detect any of these undertones. Another reason, albeit a more esoteric one, why this archetype can seem boring is because of that whole idea that men create value while women retain value. Yes, this is one thing that the Red Pillars got mostly right. The idea that an untested man is dismissed while an untested woman is not. While not 100% applicable, for the most part, women are appreciated for the traits they're more or less born with. Beauty, youth, kindness, feminine and motherly instincts, their capacity to bear and raise and care for children, while men are more or less appreciated for the knowledge, skills, and experience they attain long after their birth, and young untested males are in fact belittled and called green little boys. The natural course for a male is to start from nothing and wind up with a great deal of something through the hero's journey. He does not retain some initial value that he's born with like women, he attains value throughout the story, if you will. And that's why this type of hero registers as strange in people's subconscious, because he retains value much like women instead of attaining it. He's already near perfect, and his mission is to not falter and get corrupted, whereas other archetypes more or less start out from zero and have to work and toil to become powerful, to become moral, to become the hero. But from a character writing standpoint, Cap, Clark, and Lou were born moral, powerful, and special respectively. This is the bread and butter of this archetype, the "no, you move" quote from the Captain America comics that they adapted into Civil War perfectly describes this very traditional style of masculinity that's somewhat fallen out of style in favor of the cooler, darker, more flawed heroes and anti-heroes of today. But the fact that Superman himself has been essentially ousted out of the pop culture pantheon in favor of all the twisted doppelgangers you could imagine shows me how little people understand this type of character. Captain America's run throughout the MCU brought it back to the forefront somewhat, so that's something, but it wasn't enough to fully revive the archetype, something that might only happen when James Gunn's interpretation of Superman arrives on the scene. I don't know, we'll see. From a storytelling standpoint, the cool thing about Cap in particular is how clearly he showcases that this type of hero is more static than any other. And some people might take offense that I didn't include Luke Skywalker in the same category, but lawful good as he is, Luke didn't start out with unwavering morality. His motivation wasn't ultimate good, it was a desire for adventure as it usually is. But stuff happens along the way that turns him into the hero. Meanwhile, Steve Rogers started out as the hero. His primary desire, as soon as we meet him, is to help people.
I don't want to kill anyone. I don't like bullies.
He is the purest distillation of this type of hero because he was morally in the right place from the start of the story. Even Superman had to learn the difference between right and wrong, why he shouldn't be a bully or even fight back against bullies, or why he shouldn't use his powers to cheat. Superman was born with physical power and attained moral power along the way. Steve Rogers was born with moral power and attained physical power along the way. Throughout his movies, it is not he who changes, grows, and adapts to the world around him, it is the world that is forced to change and adapt to him, for he is the voice of moral reason. The films don't always accomplish this flawlessly, but they do it well enough. You know, we all like the funny guy, the exuberant characters, the dude who's a bit of a lovable asshole, be it in a film or in real life, the brooding anti-heroes, the people that flirt with danger, but they're not the ones who earn our respect necessarily. The ones who earn our respect are the friend who doesn't talk about you behind your back, the guy who doesn't inform on his classmates, the government official marshal who refuses bribes, the girl who refuses to sleep with her boss to get ahead in the workplace. These are the things that stick with us, the things that make us go, dude, that guy's a real one. Now that's a leader I'll follow. And that's really the secret to portraying this archetype in a compelling way. Focus on the inner conflict, not the outer one. The moral and psychological battle, not the physical one. That's when the staunch, stout, steady, stalwart, steadfast, devoted, dedicated, dependable, implacable, unchanging, unwavering, unswerving, unyielding, unflinching, uncompromising masculine shines. I have a problem naming things, I know. By the way, you ever notice that the more you embody this archetype, the more women want to poke and prod and find chinks in the armor, and that it sends them over the edge when they don't? It's never made explicit, but Steve being such a genuine, excellent, and unusually forthright dude in Winter Soldier drives Natasha crazy, and she can't help but try to tease and test and be a flirt around him, and when he doesn't crack, it drives her even crazier. There ain't much such relevant footage for Clark and Lois, sadly, except perhaps in that new animated show. And Kitana not so secretly wants Liu Kang to do depraved things to her, cause how dare this mere mortal be so goddamn powerful, pretty-faced, and honorable? Fuck him. Literally.